Haoyu wiped the sweat from the base and hit the obsidian mine heavily, making a dull bang. The Karma 7 star in the edge of the galaxy is always filled with the smell of sulfur and metal. It is the edge of human colonization, with barren resources, and is the energy cornerstone of the International Alliance. He lowered his head and looked at the broken mine in his hand, and smiled bitterly. When can this broken thing be changed to a high-tech one? Haoyu, please stop complaining. Dig 2 more tons, and our bonus this month will double. The old coworker next to him grinned, revealing his teeth that were stained with mines. These miners sweat a lot every day at a depth of 100 meters underground, and even the sun has become a luxury. Double? It's good to buy a second-hand robot arm. Haoyu kept pursuing his shoulders and continued to purse the mine. He is just over 20 years old this year, and he is still carrying a young man's grin on his face, but there is a stubbornness in his eyes that he is dissatisfied. Karma 7 is his homeland. He has heard since he was a child that there are unknown cracks around the universe, hiding endless dangers and treasures. But to him, those stories are just jokes that are solved in mines, and the real life is only mines and sweat. Just as he was about to dig another jar, a low vibration suddenly came from the ground, like some huge heart beating. The lighting lamps in the mines flickered for a few times, and a strange chill filled the air. What's the situation? Earthquake? The old Zhang stopped the work in his hand and kept Zhang Wang from all over the place. Impossible, the earth quality of this planet is very stable. Haoyu raised his eyebrows, his ears sticking close to the mine, and tried to hear the source of the sound. Suddenly, a dazzling blue light burst out from the cracks of the mine, like a sharp blade tearing the darkness and thrusting his eyes. Ah! Haoyu covered his eyes with intent, and it seemed as if he was struck by thunder in the sea of brain. An indescribable force instantly poured into his mind. He felt his brain as if it was about to explode, and countless strange pictures flashed through. The stars collapsed, unknown cracks swallowed everything, and the strange low voice seemed to come from another dimension. Haoyu. What's wrong with you? The old man supported him, full of shock. Haoyu bit his teeth tightly and stood firmly. The pain in his brain gradually subsided, replaced by an unprecedented sense of clarity. He looked down and saw a faint blue light floating around his palm, like an invisible force surging. I'm fine. He gasped and tried to clench his fist. The blue light instantly closed, allowing him to feel an unprecedented force. What is this? Before he finished speaking, a sharp roar suddenly came from the depths of the mine, like a wild beast or something that was not human. The ground shook again, and this time it became even more intense, and the gravel fell from the top, making the miners shocked. Run! Something has come! The old man yelled, dragging Haoyu and running towards the exit. But they didn't run a few steps, and a group of deformed creatures rushed out in the darkness deep in the mine. Their bodies are like translucent fruits, with sharp minions, and the chorus flashed with the same blue light as the crack. These monsters were extremely fast and turned to the recent miners in the blink of an eye. Help! A cry of calamity sounded, and a miner was torn apart by sharp claws, with blood scattered on the mine. Haoyu's pupils shrank and his heart beat faster. He had never seen such a thing, but he just told him that this thing had something to do with the blue light just now. He subconsciously pushed Lao Zhang behind him and roared, "Hide him! Don't come out! You're crazy! Why can we beat this monster?" The old Zhang was sweating profusely. Haoyu didn't answer, and an instinct suddenly appeared in the brain. He stretched out his hand and sniffed at the coming monster. Crash! An invisible force burst out from his palm, rolling into the mine like a mad wind. The monster in front of the head was instantly flattened, as if it was crushed by an invisible hand, and the blue liquid filled the ground. The other monsters were blown away by the waves, smashed hard on the mine, making a roar. What is this? The old Zhang was stunned, looking at Haoyu with a look of a ghost. Haoyu himself was also stunned, looking down at his hand, and still had the remaining power in his brain. He didn't know what this was, but he could feel that this power came from his body, like an innate instinct. Haoyu, how did you do it? Other miners also came over, their faces filled with shock and admiration. "Don't ask me, I don't know." Haoyu smiled bitterly and slapped his head, but there was a little more excitement in his eyes. This power may change his fate. However, the monster did not retreat. The depth of the mine came again and roared, and more blue light creatures sprinkled out, with a very large number exceeding the moment. This time they have a larger body shape, and the minions are still flashing with arcs, like an evolved version. "Damn, come again?" Haoyu bit his teeth and raised his hands again. This time he tried to concentrate and a picture appeared in his brain. An invisible giant hand crushed everything. He growled, "Broken to me." A violent wave burst out from the air, as if the space was torn apart. Before the monsters approached, they were crushed into pieces by invisible forces, and the vibrations in the mine gradually subsided. The miners were stunned as if they were wooden chickens, and then they burst into a shocking cry, "Haoyu! You are a hero! Save all of us!" Haoyu was panting, his brain was a little dizzy, but looking at his companion's gratitude eyes, a warm current surged in his heart. He grinned and said, "Stop being sorry, his legs are still soft." At this moment, a low engine sound came from outside the mine, and a silver-white starship landed at the entrance of the mine. The flying boat door opened and a woman in a white study uniform walked down. She wore a pair of high-tech lenses, her long hair was neatly tailed, and her atmosphere was cold and professional. "Who is Haoyu?" The woman's voice was crisp, her eyes swept across the crowd, and finally locked on Haoyu. "I am." Haoyu looked at the Star Alliance badge on the other party's chest, and felt a tight heart. How did the Star Alliance people come to this kind of planet? "My name is Sun Xiaowen, a special researcher of the International Alliance." She walked to Haoyu, looked him up and down, and was surprised in her language. "Did you trigger the mental power wave just now?" "Mental power? What's the point?" Haoyu was confused. The blue light and power that had just turned in his brain, and he had never heard of this word. Sun Xiaowen pushed the glass and slid it on the corner of her mouth. "Simply put, the power you just showed is mental power. A very rare mental power awakening can only be possessed by none of them. You may not know that your fluctuation value just now has exceeded the highest value recorded in the Alliance." "What?" Haoyu's eyes widened, and his brain was full of chaos. "You said, am I a talent? It's not just a talent, but also a cosmic potential." Sun Xiaowen's linguistic spirit became serious. "There are cracks of unknown dimensions on the Karma 7 star. This phenomenon is quite common in the galaxy. But you can awaken your mind from the crack energy and repel those creatures, which means you may be the key to fighting the unknown threat." "Unknown threat? Those monsters just now?" Haoyu felt a chill in his heart when he thought of those deformed creatures. "Yes, but they're just the tip of the iceberg." Sun Xiaowen clicked on the light screen on her wrist and projected a star with several red cracks marked on the edge. These cracks lead to another dimension, from which creatures storm, threatening human survival. The Star Alliance is creating an ultimate weapon that can destroy the planet and seal the cracks. But we need a mindful guru like you to protect this mission. Protection mission? Haoyu's heartbeat accelerated. He grew up on a minefield since he was a child, and never thought that he could be related to the words cosmic and weapons. Yes, this is an opportunity to change one's fate. Sun Xiaowen looked straight into his eyes, with encouragement in her temperament. You have the potential to become the strongest mindset and protect the future of human beings. But this path is full of danger. Do you want to join? Haoyu was silent for a moment, in the scene where the monster was just hit by the sea of brain, and his companions were gratefully looking. He clamped his fists tightly, felt the movement of the power in his body, and finally pointed, I do not want to go through the days of mine digging again. If this force can protect my home, I will try it. Sun Xiaowen smiled with satisfaction. It's great, clean up and follow me. The Alliance will provide you with the best training and decoration. Wait. Can I bring the old Zhang and the others? Haoyu turned his head and looked at the miners, with a calm look. They are my family and can't be left behind. Sun Xiaowen hesitated for a moment and then pointed out, Yes, the Alliance will arrange their safety. But you have to understand that your path is different from them. I know. Haoyu grinned and shouted to the old Zhang and others, have you heard it? Brother is going to save the universe, don't drag your back. Go to you, don't be so stinky. The old man smiled, his eyes filled with relief. At this moment, in the monitoring tower far from the mine, a pair of cold eyes were watching everything through the screen. The man was wearing a long black robe and a half-metal mask on his face. His fingers tapped the table, making a click sound. Those who awaken the mind power are interesting. His voice was low and shally, and a sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth. Haoyu, right? I, Jean, have decided on this force. The ultimate weapon of the Alliance should also be replaced by a master. The blue light flash on the screen reflects the greed that flashed through his eyes. Haoyu stood in front of the viewing window of the flying boat, staring at the giant building floating in the starry sky outside the window, the core base of the Star Alliance cores of the sky. This base seems to be made of pure light and metal. It has countless circular structures that lie on the huge energy core in the center, emitting light that is light blue, like the heart of the universe is beating. Compared with the deserted mines of Star Karma 7, this place is simply another world. This place, is it too annoying, right? Haoyu couldn't help but mutter, his voice filled with shock. Sun Xiaowen stood beside him, pushing the glass. Her language was calm but proud. The core of the sky is the pinnacle of human technology, and all the top resources in the League are concentrated here. The training grounds of the Mind Power Trainer, the Weapon Research and Development Center, and even the Ultimate Weapon Assembly are completed in this base. The training you are about to receive is also the top level in the League. Top training? It's quite intimidating. Haoyu snatched his head and grinned, but I don't have any foundation as a local bun, so don't lose my eyes until then. Your potential has surpassed all records. Sun Xiaowen turned her head and looked at him with a serious look. As long as you keep up with the training progress, you will become the trump card of the Alliance. But I have to remind you that the path of the Mind Master is not easy, and less than 10% of those who awaken their mental power can truly control this force. 1%? Haoyu raised his eyebrows, his heart tightened, but immediately showed a dissatisfied expression. Then I insist on trying to see if I can become that exception. The flying boat steadily drove into the berth of the base. When the door opened, a fresh air came over the surface, which was completely different from the sulfur smell of the mine. Haoyu followed Sun Xiaowen off the flying boat, and they were greeted by a team full of weapons and a middle-aged man in a dark blue uniform. He is tall and has a high-tech eye mask on his left eye, and his aura is so strong that people dare not look directly at him. Dr. Sun, welcome back. The man clicked a little, then turned his eyes to Haoyu, and looked up and down. Is this the new awakener you are talking about? It looks ordinary. Haoyu was stunned by this and immediately replied, Uncle, don't just look at the appearance. I've broken the monster in the mine. The man was stunned for a moment and immediately laughed. I like it because I have a little temper. I am Rick, the instructor of the League's Mind Power, and I am responsible for your training. Remember, here, speak hard and talk less. Success, speak effectively. Haoyu clenched his fists and a desire to fight ignited in his heart. He knew that this was not Karma 7 star, and he had to prove himself. Sun Xiaowen brought Haoyu to a high-tech experiment room, which was filled with various instruments, and complex data charts were projected on the wall. She took out a small metal hand ring from a device, with a dense pattern engraved on the surface, and a blue crystal inlaid in the center, emitting a faint light. What is this? Haoyu passed by curiously, feeling that the crystal stone contained some familiar energy. I have developed the mindfulness enhancement device myself. Sun Xiaowen sent his hand to him and explained, it can amplify your mental fluctuations, allowing you to control your mind more accurately, and at the same time reduce your mental burden. However, this thing has high requirements for users, and if you can't control it, it may backfire yourself. Back off? It's a bit scary to hear. Haoyu took the hand ring, felt the metal ice slutty touch, and immediately grinned, but how can you know if you don't try? Come on. He directly put his hand ring on his left wrist, and in an instant, a warm energy stormed out of the crystal, rolling his arm straight into the sea of brain. Haoyu closed his eyes and felt that his consciousness was pulled into a sea of stars without a corner, and every star was connected with his thoughts. He clenched his fist lightly, and the air inside the experiment room suddenly twisted, and several small instruments actually floated up, as if they were being held by invisible hands. This power is so strong. Haoyu opened his eyes quietly, full of joy. I feel that I can crush an entire mind mountain. Don't be too proud, this is just a basic increase. Sun Xiaowen pushed the lens, with a warning in her language, the stronger the mind, the greater the mental burden. You need to train to adapt to it, otherwise it may burn your brain. Braining your brain? This joke is not funny. Haoyu smiled, but he was secretly alert in his heart. He knew that this power was to use double blades, and he had to be careful. A few days later, Haoyu was arranged to enter the training ground for mind power. In the training ground is a huge circular space surrounded by transparent energy barriers and a simulated combat area in the center, which can simulate various environments and enemies. In the first class, Rick directly involved him in a high-strength simulation battle. His opponent was a well-established mindset in the Alliance, and the agent was Steel Blade. Boy, don't hide it from the newcomer, let me see your ability. Steel Blade stood opposite the battlefield, burly, with both hands and chests, and a strong wave of mental power radiated from his body. He is one of the top forces of the Alliance, saying that he can use his mind to directly tear the outer shell of the warship. Come on, who are you afraid of? Haoyu grinned, and the blue light on the ring of his left hand flickered slightly. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes and felt the power inside his body. Then he suddenly opened up. With both hands, an invisible shock wave exploded instantly, and cracks were shook out of the ground. The Steel Blade's expression changed, and he quickly raised his hand, forming a mental barrier in front of him, forcibly squeezing the impact wave. But his footsteps were shaken back half a step, and his face was shocked. What a guy, he has strong strength, but he is too dispersed. Speaking, he swung his hands and dozens of invisible blades of thought power shot towards Haoyu from all directions, so fast that he could hardly see the cliff clearly. Haoyu's heart was tightened and his body was instinctively avoided it, but he was still wiped by a blade of thought and his clothes were torn apart in an instant, and his skin was stinging. Damn, it hurts. Haoyu gritted his teeth, realizing that he could not fight hard. He closed his eyes and tried to concentrate with the method taught by Sun Xiaowen. A picture appeared in the sea of brain, an invisible giant net covering his body. He whispered, "Defend." A blue light curtain spread around him, like an energy shield, holding the remaining blade of mind. Seeing the steel blade, there was a flash of praise in my eyes. The reaction is good, but what about the attack? Before Haoyu could reply, he clenched his fist suddenly, and the ground suddenly cracked, and a huge mental force forced Haoyu to force him to kneel down. Haoyu bit his teeth tightly, and the pain in the sea of his brain was in pain, but he held it, and his left hand shone brightly, and he growled, "Break it for me." A stronger shock wave exploded, and this time it directly forced the steel blade torn apart, and even shook him back several meters. When the blade landed on the ground, a deep slapped crack broke under the foot. He gasped and finally smiled, "Boy, you won." "I think so." The training ground was silent, and then the high-level and students of the Alliance who were fighting burst into shocking calls. Haoyu stood in the field, gasping heavily and sweating heavily, but his eyes were filled with excitement and confidence. He knew that this was just the beginning. Haoyu fucked beautifully. Rick walked over and patted his shoulder, full of appreciation in his language. "Your potential is far beyond expectations, and the Alliance will focus on cultivating you." Sun Xiaowen also left, holding a data board in her hand and pushed the lens. The fluctuation value just now refreshed the record, and the amplification device has an adaptability to you to reach 95%, which is unprecedented. However, don't be too proud, the real challenge is still behind. What challenge? Haoyu wiped his sweat and asked curiously. Sun Xiaowen was about to answer when suddenly a harsh police report rang out in the base. "Red warning lights, and a rapid sound was heard on the broadcast, "Police." An abnormal energy fluctuation was detected in the weapon research and development area, and everyone immediately entered the battle state. "What's the situation?" Haoyu was stunned and turned to look at Sun Xiaowen. Her face became solemn, and she quickly turned on the light screen on her wrist and adjusted the monitoring screen. "Someone has penetrated the ultimate weapon development area and tried to draw the core technology. The energy waves show that the other party may have brought biological energy of unknown dimensions." "Unknown dimensions? Those monsters again?" Haoyu's heart tightened, remembering the deformed creatures in the mine, and clenched his fists. "I'll go and see." "No, you haven't completed the training yet, it's too dangerous." Sun Xiaowen wanted to stop him. "Dangerous? Didn't I win the steel blade just now? Besides, isn't the protection base my mission?" Haoyu grinned. "Calm down, don't worry, I'm responsible." Sun Xiaowen hesitated for a moment and finally pointed. "Okay, but you have to follow me and don't act without permission." The two quickly headed to the R&D area. The corridor along the way had been blocked, and the team was fighting fiercely with a group of men in black. The men in black were well equipped, and the weapons in their hands emitted strange blue light, and the energy on the mine monsters seemed to be emitted. Haoyu narrowed his eyes, and suddenly felt a sting in the sea of brain. He covered his head with a subconscious mind and said in a low voice, "This energy is so familiar." "What's wrong with you?" Sun Xiaowen asked nervously. "It's okay, but I can feel that they have a force on them, just like the things in the crack." Haoyu gritted his teeth, closed his eyes and concentrated, and then suddenly opened. "Where?" "Their main force is in the core laboratory." Sun Xiaowen looked at him in surprise. "Can you feel it?" "This is something that a high-level mind guru can do." "Stop telling me, solve them first." Haoyu cut off her and rushed towards the experiment room. In the experiment room, a man in black was cracking the core database of the ultimate weapon. A group of blue energy floated beside him, distorted in shape, emitting a low roar, like a living thing. When Haoyu rushed in, the energy suddenly turned to him, making a sharp scream, causing his brain to hurt. "This thing is stronger than the monster on the mine." Haoyu bit his teeth tightly, and his left hand shone brightly. He suddenly waved his hand, and the invisible power rushed towards the energy body, which only made it retreat slightly, and immediately rushed over. "Be careful, this is a parasitic energy of unknown dimensions that can invade mental power." Sun Xiaowen shouted, and quickly released a high-energy electromagnetic bullet, which temporarily retreated its energy. The man in black turned over and sneered. "I didn't expect that there was such a little monster in the Alliance. However, you are too late and the data has been obtained." As he said, he pressed the device on his wrist, and his figure disappeared instantly, as if he was sent away. "Running?" Haoyu roared angrily, trying to chase, but the energy of the group came again, faster, and a destructive force was revealed in the blue light. He could only face up with his head and push his hands, and his mind power formed a barrier, which was directly shattered by the energy body. The impact force made him fly out of several meters and smash it hard on the wall. "Haoyu." Sun Xiaowen rushed over and checked his condition. "Cough. I'm fine." Haoyu spitted out a mouthful of blood, his eyes even more determined. "This thing is too strange, and it must be solved." He stood up strongly, and the scene of mine appeared in the sea of his brain, and that instinct could reappear. He closed his eyes, felt the movement of the inner strength, and then sniffed, "Broken." This time, the power of mind is no longer a simple shock wave, but condenses into an invisible giant hand, holding the energy body hard and crushing it into pieces. The blue light was 4 times, and the air inside the experiment room finally returned to level, but Haoyu also lost his mental power and almost fell down. "Fuck you beautifully, but you're too eager to strengthen yourself." Sun Xiaowen held him, holding a grudge in her voice. "It's okay, I have to try it out at all." Haoyu grinned, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and then asked, "Is that guy just got the data, which means that the secret of the ultimate weapon was stolen?" Sun Xiaowen clicked on the light screen and checked the database, and her face became even more difficult to see. Some of the data in the core technology have been downloaded, but fortunately it is the outermost encryption layer, and it has no touch in the real core. However, the people who have entered this time are likely to come from the black market forces, and they have contact with creatures of unknown dimensions. This is the biggest threat. Black market power? Also, what is the relationship between ultimate weapons and cracks? Haoyu felt that things were getting more and more complicated. Sun Xiaowen was silent for a moment and finally opened her mouth. The energy core of the ultimate weapon comes from the crack of an unknown dimension. We extracted the energy from the crack, tried to use it to seal the crack, and even destroy the entire dimension. But this also means that the weapon itself may become the target of the crack creatures, or even be used by them. What? Haoyu's eyes widened, and a group of terrible people in his brain was terrified. Are you saying that the weapons we made may have come to help those monsters? This is the biggest concern. Sun Xiaowen pushed the lens and said with a heavy linguistic spirit. So we need a mindful guru like you to protect your weapons and investigate the truth about the rift. Only by finding the source of the rift can we completely resolve the threat. Haoyu clenched his fists tightly, feeling the warmth left on the hand ring, and his eyes gradually became firm. Okay, I understand. Whether it is the black market or the monster, I will not let them succeed. I will defend this weapon in this base. Sun Xiaowen looked at him and showed a clean smile. You are growing faster than I expected. Next, we will strengthen the base defense and conduct higher-level training on you. But remember, enemies may come back anytime, and you have to be prepared. Don't worry, I'm not the one who will retreat. Haoyu grinned, his eyes burning with aspirations. At the same time, in a secret space station along the galaxy, Shahan sat on a huge black throne, and the light screen in front of him showed the data that had just been downloaded. His men stood respectfully aside and reported, Header, although the data is incomplete, it is enough to allow us to create low-level energy simulators that can attract more crack creatures for our use. Very good. Shahan smiled and knocked his fingers on the handrail of the throne, with a flash of greed in his eyes. Haoyu. This boy's mind power is stronger than I expected. Continue to monitor him. I want his power and the ultimate weapon of the Alliance. The universe will eventually belong to me. Outside the space station, in the depth of the starry sky, a hidden blue crack spread slowly, like a huge mouth, waiting to swallow everything. Haoyu stood in the combat meeting room of the core of the sky. A galaxy map was projected on the huge light screen in front of him, and a red crack symbol was marked on the edge, like a scar in the starry sky. The atmosphere inside the conference room was depressed, and several high-level alliances sat at long tables, their faces solemn. Instructor Rick stood in front of the light screen, his fingers on the crack mark, and his voice was low. This is the Edge star field north of the star Karma 7, with the name Ghost Blue Crack. In the past few days, the energy fluctuations of the crack have increased abnormally, and a large number of unknown biological activities have been monitored. We suspect that the black market forces are using crack energy to try to create a larger-scale threat. Haoyu leaned on the back of the chair, holding his chest with his hands in his chest, and his eyebrows were slightly lit. So, what do you mean is to let me inspect this place? It's okay. Rek turned his head to him, his eyes sharp. You are the strongest mind guru in the Alliance at present. Only you can interfere with the mental power near the rift. The mission is simple. Dive into the rift, collect energy data around the rift, and confirm the scope of the black market power activities. If possible, destroy their outposts. Simple? It sounds like a death-sending life. Haoyu curled his lips, but there was a flash of excitement in his eyes. He knew that although this mission was dangerous, it was also an opportunity to prove himself. Sun Xiaowen sat next to him, pushed the lens, and said calmly, Don't underestimate this task. The energy field of the blue crack can interfere with most electronic equipment and even invade mental power. Ordinary people will feel disastrous when they get close to it. Even the mind-wielding master may be injured by overloading. However, I have prepared the latest equipment for you, which should help you with these interference. Speaking, she took out a silver metal box from under the table, and after opening it, she exposed a thin battle suit, covered with a dense energy pattern, and a larger blue crystal was embedded in her chest, which was in response to the mind-enhancing device on Haoyu's wrist. In addition, there are several small energy vents and a pair of high-tech combat lenses. This battle suit is called Star Core Protection, which can partially neutralize your mind power waves with the crack energy, reducing mental burden. Sun Xiaowen pointed to the battle suit and explained, the lens has a real-time data analysis system built into it, which can monitor the energy waves around it in real time to help you locate enemies. The bullet is a weapon that specializes in the energy core of unknown creatures. Haoyu picked up the battle suit, felt the light and powerful material, and grinned. Sister Xiaowen, your technological brain is really not a big deal. With this set of equipment, I feel that I can pick a whole team. Don't be too confident. Sun Xiaowen glanced at him coldly, the equipment is just a helper. What is really determined to win is your mental control. Remember, the first goal of the mission is to detect and not act voluntarily. I know, I'm not stupid. Haoyu stood up and looked at Rick with a firm look. When will you come out? Tonight. Rick pointed, his language was unquestionable. A stunning detective ship will send you to the neighborhood star realm, and when you get there, everything depends on yourself. The Alliance will maintain a long distance of contact, but the cracks are severely interfering, and communication may be interrupted. Haoyu, don't let us down. Don't worry, wrap it on me. Haoyu patted his chest, his eyes burning with ambition. A few hours later, Haoyu put on a Star Core guarding suit, stood in front of the viewing window of the detective ship, and looked at the core of the sky that was moving away from the window. The ship sailed at superlight speed, and the starry sky turned into streams of light in the field, and the direction of the star domain was getting closer and closer. He looked down at the amplification device on his wrist, feeling the familiar movement inside his body, and was both tight and expectant. Haoyu, remember what I said, I'm more careful than to fight hard. Sun Xiaowen's voice came from the communication device, carrying a close look. Sister Xiaowen, why are you more tight than me? Haoyu grinned, speaking lightly, don't worry, I'm very hard-earned, it's not that easy to quit. Sun Xiaowen didn't say anything anymore, but just silenced the communication. The detective ship quickly arrived outside the edge of the star area. Haoyu jumped out of the boat's bomb, landed slowly in a vacuum environment in a battle suit, and under his feet was a deserted stone star. It is only a few 100,000 kilometers away from the ghost blue crack. In the starry sky far away, a huge blue crack floats, like a huge open eye, scattering strange and powerful energy waves. This place is really awesome. Haoyu muttered in a low voice. The combat lens automatically started, and a series of data were displayed in the field. The energy fluctuation value of the crack was far beyond expectations, and there was a sense of pressure in the air. His brain hurt, as if he was stabbed invisibly, but the Star Core guard suit emitted a warm feeling, quickly neutralizing this inappropriateness. It seems that Sister Xiaowen's equipment is really useful. Haoyu relaxed and began to walk carefully towards the crack. He used the silo group as a cover to avoid possible monitoring, and at the same time used his mind to perceive the static surroundings. Before long, a string of red warnings suddenly flashed on the lens screen. Abnormal energy concentration was detected 1,000 meters ahead. Hear you. Haoyu narrowed his eyes, hid behind a giant stone, and quietly poked out his head. Only see dozens of blue-light creatures floating in the starry sky far away. Their shapes are more deformed than those seen in mines. Their bodies are like translucent liquids, with strong light flashing at the core, with arcs lying on their minions, and several small black market warships surrounding them, with skeleton markings covered with skeletons. The black market power is indeed here. Haoyu gritted his teeth and quickly recorded the data with his eyeglasses, and was ready to send the information back to the Alliance. But at this moment, a blue-light creature suddenly turned around, as if it had sensed something, and made a sharp roar, immediately carrying other creatures and warships in his direction. Damn, I've been discovered. Haoyu lowered his curse and quickly retreated, but the opponent's speed was extremely fast, and he narrowed the distance in the blink of an eye. Several energy cannons were shot out from the warplane, and they were trapped in the stone group, with 4 gravels. Haoyu had to expose his position. He suddenly waved his hand, and his mind power formed a barrier, which forced the cannon fire. Since you can't avoid it, then hit it. He gritted his teeth, his left hand shone brightly, and the blue crystal on the battle suit was also flashed, and the power inside his body was infinitely magnified. He closed his eyes and focused his mind, and a picture appeared in the sea of brains, an invisible giant hand crushing everything. Then he growled, "Broken!" A powerful wave of thought burst out, like a wild wind rolling into the starry sky. The blue light creatures in the front were torn apart in an instant, and the warship was shocked and lost control. They hit the stone hard, and a group of fire burst out. But more organisms emerged from the cracks, and the number exceeded expectations, as if they were in vain and were stinging. The roars made Haoyu's brain sting. Why is this monster not in a head? Haoyu gasped, feeling that his mental power was consumed hugely, and the pain in the brain became stronger and stronger. Although the battle suit can neutralize some interference, the pressure of the cracks still makes him a little difficult. He gritted his teeth and squeezed several thought powers, repelling wave after wave of creatures, but the enemy's number of wires did not decrease at all, but more and more battles joined the battle. At this moment, the War lens suddenly issued a rapid alarm, and a huge energy wave was displayed on the screen, transmitting from the depth of the crack. Haoyu looked up and saw that the center of the crack was cracked and a large blue light creature crawled out. Its body was as big as a small warship. The blue light at the core almost condensed into reality, emitting a sense of destructive pressure, and the surrounding starry sky was distorted by its energy. This thing is boss level, right? Haoyu felt his heart tightened and felt unprecedented pressure. As soon as this giant creature appeared, other blue light creatures seemed to be summoned, and the attack became even more crazy. Haoyu's thought barrier was broken, and the energy traces on the battle suit also began to flash, as if they were overloaded. Haoyu, retreat. The energy value of this creature is far beyond your right range. Sun Xiaowen's voice came from the communication device, carrying a rare anxiety. Retreat? Where to retreat? This place is not in front of the village, but not in the shop. Haoyu gritted his teeth, avoided the claws of a creature, and immediately hit it with a backhand and crushed it. His mental power is approaching the limit, and the pain in the brain seems to tear his mind apart, but he knows that if he retreats now, these monsters may be out of the Edge Star domain and threaten more galaxies. No, I have to fight. Haoyu's eyes flashed and he closed his eyes and tried to concentrate all his mental power in his body. He recalled the awakening at the mine and the breakthrough on the training ground. A new picture suddenly appeared in the brain, countless stars circled, turning into a vast force, listening to his call. The power of the stars, come. He suddenly opened his eyes, his hands high, and the blue crystals on the battle suit burst out with dazzling light, and the left hand ring almost burned. An unprecedented force stormed out of his body, and the group of stones in the starry sky suddenly shook, as if they were attracted by invisible power. Then, with him as the center, it turned into meteors and smashed towards the blue light biological army. Ji. The group of stones fell like a sky, and each strike was filled with destructive power. The pieces of blue light creatures were crushed, and the warships were torn into pieces. Even the giant creatures were hit by the stones. The blue light drama in the core flashed violently, and it emitted a roar. Is this the power of stars? Haoyu gasped and looked down at his hands, his eyes filled with shock. He could feel that this force was far beyond any previous breakthrough, like opening a certain taboo area. But at the same time, his mental power was almost exhausted, and the pain in his brain made his eyes dark and he almost lost his mind. Haoyu, your fluctuation value breaks through the limit of the Mind Master. Sun Xiaowen's voice came from the communication device, with unbelievable surprise. You did it. This is unprecedented. Don't say it. I can't hold it back. Haoyu smiled bitterly, reluctantly calmed his body, his eyes swept over the starry sky, confirming that the main force of the enemy had been destroyed. But at this moment, a low laugh came from the direction of the crack, as if it was rising from another dimension, making people creepy. Wonderful, it's really wonderful. A figure walked out of the crack, wearing a long black robe, a half-metal mask on his face, and holding a staff that radiated blue light in his hand. His body was surrounded by the same energy as the crack, and his aura was so strong that it made Haoyu feel tight. "Who are you?" Haoyu narrowed his eyes, strengthened his mental power, and prepared to fight at any time. "My name is Jahan, the leader of the black market power." The man smiled and his eyes locked. "Haoyu, carrying a silk reed. Your power is stronger than I expected. The power of the stars. This kind of talent is really hard to meet in thousands of years." "Jahan?" Haoyu gritted his teeth, remembering the information mentioned by Sun Xiaowen. This person was the leader of the Alliance. "You are controlling these monsters to destroy humans?" "Remove?" No, I just borrow their power to reshape the order of the universe." Jahan started his hand, with a passion in his language. "Biogens of unknown dimensions have infinite potential. As long as they can control them, I can become the master of the universe." "Haoyu, your power is so compatible with the energy of the crack, why don't you join me? The Alliance is just a group of cowards. They dare not really use the power of the crack, and I can give you true freedom and power." "Join you? Be a dream." Haoyu sneered and clenched his fists. "I'm not interested in being a monster's lackey. How many people have you harmed? I won't be with you. Young people, don't be too rigid." Jahan shook his head, his eyes flashed with disappointment. "Since you don't know anything, don't blame me for being strong." Before he finished speaking, he suddenly slapped his power staff, and a powerful blue energy wave burst out, like the power of the crack itself, directly slamming Haoyu. Haoyu felt tight and raised his hands hard, forming a barrier, but this energy exceeded his expectations. The barrier was torn apart in an instant, and his entire person was shocked for hundreds of meters. The pattern on the battle suit was flashed violently, as if it would collapse at any time. "Damn, this guy is stronger than a monster." Haoyu gritted his teeth and stood firmly, causing pain in the sea of brains, but he knew that he could not retreat. He closed his eyes and felt the power of the stars. Then he suddenly waved his hand, and many stones were attracted to him, turning into a meteor and smashing towards Jahan. Jahan sneered, his wield of power, and the blue energy formed a spiral, swallowing the stone. Then he slapped his backhand and an energy blade shot straight at Haoyu. Haoyu's side was avoiding his body, but his shoulders were still rubbed, and his fighting suit was torn and blood was thrown out. "Your power of stars is really amazing, but you don't really control it." Jahan's voice mocked, "If you don't surrender, I will never have the chance to regret it." "Xiao Wu!" Haoyu roared, his hands high, and the power of the stars exploded again. This time, he no longer simply turned the stones, but condensed his mind power into a huge light spear, like a sharp blade gathering in the stars, piercing Jahan. Jahan's expression changed, his power stick was arched, and the blue energy formed a shield, barely slamming the light spear, but his figure was also shrunk for 10 meters, and a solemn appeared on his face. "Good boy, you really have some ability." Both sides exchanged again, and the power of the stars and the cracking energy collided in the starry sky, exploding a dazzling wave of shock. Although Haoyu was at a disadvantage, he used the power of breaking through and stood firm with Jahan, fighting as much as possible for every move. Jahan's attack became more and more powerful, but Haoyu's will became more and more stable, and his eyes were filled with unyielding ambition. Just as the battle entered the white heat, Jahan suddenly sneered, the stick in his hand shone brightly, and a powerful suction force exploded from the crack, as if pulling the entire starry sky into it. Haoyu was shocked and felt an unprecedented crisis, but he didn't have time to react. A hidden black market warship suddenly shot out a beam of light from a distance, directly locking a piece of metal slaughter floating away. It was the core fragment of the ultimate weapon, which was previously taken from the nuclear of the sky by the black market force. "Not good!" Haoyu roared, trying to stop it, but Jahan's attack suddenly increased, and the blue energy rushed in like a frenzy, forcing him to defend with all his strength. The warhead quickly retracted the fragments, and then Jahan suddenly slapped his power rod. The energy wave of the crack instantly exploded, as if it had been injected with some kind of catalyst. The crack quickly expanded, and more blue light creatures stormed out of it, roaring and deafening. Haoyu, the game ends here. Jahan smiled and retreated slowly, blending into the blue light of the crack. After the core fragments, the power of the crack will belong to me. When you see me next time, the order of the universe has changed. Don't imagine. Haoyu roared angrily, fighting for the last force. The power of the star turned into a pillar of light, shooting directly into Jahan. But the other party had completely integrated into the crack, and the light column only hit the empty space. Later, the crack's energy burst out with a powerful shock wave, shaking Haoyu hard, and the battle service almost collapsed. Haoyu, retreat quickly. The crack energy is about to get out of control. Sun Xiaowen's voice came from the communication device again, with incomparable anxiety. Haoyu bit his teeth and looked at the growing cracks in the storm of biological troops, knowing that he had no way to stop them. He clenched his fists, his eyes filled with anger and reluctance. Jahan, I've recorded this account. He quickly retreated, and with the help of the final energy of the battle suit, he reluctantly escaped from the influence of the rift, and the remote detective ship came to him and took him out of the star field. But the blue light of the crack is still exploding, and the roar of unknown creatures returns to the starry sky, like the final warning to humans. Haoyu sat in the medical carriage that was detecting the ship. His body was covered with scars, and his fighting suit was already broken and unbearable. Sun Xiaowen looked at him through the light screen, with a solemn face. You have broken through the limit of your mind and destroyed the main force of the enemy. This is a huge victory. But the core fragments are destroyed and the cracks are enlarged, and the threat will be even more serious. I know, it's me who was careless. Haoyu lowered his head, clenched his fists, and was full of unwillingness to say goodbye, but I won't let Jahan succeed. No matter what, I want to get back the fragments and seal the cracker. Sun Xiaowen clicked a little. Her eyes flashed with relief. Your growth exceeded expectations, and the Alliance will fully support you. Next, we will reform a plan to launch a general attack on Jahan and the slide. You recover first, and the greater battle will be at the back. Haoyu raised his head, looked at the blue light in the starry sky outside the window, and his eyes were filled with ambition. He knew that this battle was not over, and he would become the last line of defense in humanity. Haoyu sat in the medical carriage in the core of the sky, with a high-tech belt on his body. The skeleton of the battle suit was placed aside, and the light of the blue crystal was dim. He looked down at his hands, and the pain of fighting with Jahan was still in the sea of his brain, but his eyes were more stable than ever. The failure of the neighboring star domain made him understand that the threat of the cleft was far beyond imagination, and the core fragments in Jahan's hand might be the key to cause greater disaster. Haoyu, how are you recovering? Sun Xiaowen pushed the door and walked in, holding a board in her hand, and a tired look on her face, but her eyes were still sharp. She just came from the ultimate weapon research and development area and couldn't meet her eyes for several consecutive days. It's okay, I'll be lucky if my brain is not damaged. Haoyu grinned and said seriously, Sister Xiaowen, the cracking matter cannot be delayed anymore. Jahan took the fragments, and the cracking is still expanding. We must take the initiative to attack. Sun Xiaowen clicked the head, pushed the lens, and sent the data board to him. I just analyzed the energy fluctuations in the edge star domain. The core of the crack has formed a stable energy field, like an entrance to some dimension. Jahan is likely there, using debris to activate the entire potential of the crack. If we don't stop him, unknown creatures may invade the human star domain and even destroy the balance of the entire universe. Core belt? It's not easy to hear in that place. Haoyu browed, and the strange blue light of the crack appeared in the sea of brain, and Jahan's cold smile. It's not simple. Sun Xiaowen's words are heavy. The energy interference of the crack core is more than 10 times stronger than that of the neighboring star domain. Ordinary teams cannot get close to it. The mind power master with a slightly weak mental power will collapse instantly. However, the ultimate weapon has finally completed the final adjustment. As long as it can be sent to the crack core, it can release energy that can destroy the entire dimension and seal the crack in the end. Absolute weapon? Haoyu's eyes lit up. He remembered the rumors he had heard before, destroy the planet, and felt excited. Are you saying that thing blows up the crack directly? It's okay in theory. Sun Xiaowen clicked on the data board and projected a weapon design picture. At the core is a huge energy boiler, emitting blue light similar to the crack. The energy of the ultimate weapon comes from the crack itself. We extracted and condensed this power. Through precise mental control, it can be directed into a directional explosion, destroying the crack source. But the problem is that the control of the weapon requires extremely high mental power, only you can do it. Me? Haoyu was stunned for a moment, then grinned. Okay, it sounds quite a bit arrogant. However, Jahan and those monsters won't let us get closer easily, so we have to solve them first. That's exactly what I'm going to say next. Sun Xiaowen closed the projection, her eyes fixed. The Alliance has decided to launch a general attack. I will lead a team of elite soldiers to protect the ultimate weapon to the core of the rift. I'm responsible for repairing and activating the weapon, you're responsible for manipulating it and clearing the threats along the way, including Jahan. Only we? Haoyu raised his eyebrows, and he was talking in his voice. This mission sounds like it's about saving the universe. It's really saving the universe. Sun Xiaowen pointed at it without hesitation. This is the last opportunity for human beings, Haoyu, we must succeed. Haoyu was silent for a moment, then stood up, clenched his fists, and his eyes were filled with a fighting spirit. Okay, fight. I want them to know what Jahan and any monsters are, and they are causing trouble. A few hours later, a fleet of 10 top-level warships were installed in the mooring area of the Sky Core. The ultimate weapon was finally placed in the core of the flag starry, and the huge energy boiled to emit low-frequency buzzing sounds, like a giant beast that was about to be developed. Haoyu wore a newly upgraded star core protection suit, and the blue crystal shone brightly, forming a common phlegm with the amplification device on his wrist. He stood in the starry sky, looking at the team outside through the scenic window. His heart was both tight and excited. Haoyu, are you ready? Sun Xiaowen stood aside, operating her fingers on the light screen, checking the data of the weapon. It's been ready for a long time. Haoyu grinned and then said seriously, Sister Xiaowen, we can't miss it again this time. Don't worry, I won't let you fight alone. Sun Xiaowen raised her head, her eyes flashed with a warmth. The team will support you with all their strength, and the activation of the ultimate weapon will be handed over to me. You just need to focus on mind control and fighting. The fleet quickly started and sailed directly to the core of the cracker at superlight speed. As the distance got closer, the blue light in the starry sky became more and more suffocating, and a strong sense of pressure was filled with the air, and the energy barrier of the ship began to shake slightly. Haoyu stood inside the guide room, closing his eyes to sense the energy fluctuations around him, and causing pain in the brain, but the battle suit quickly neutralized this inappropriateness, allowing him to stay awake. Warning! A large amount of energy was detected ahead, with a quantity of more than 1,000, accompanied by the black market fleet signal. The ship's AI system suddenly issued a warning, and dense red spots were displayed on the light screen, like a swarm of locusts in the starry sky. Come! Haoyu suddenly opened his eyes and clenched his fists. Sister Xiaowen, you are dedicated to getting the weapons. I'll hand them over to me. Without waiting for Sun Xiaowen to answer, he rushed directly to the boat's bombardment, jumped into the starry sky in a battle suit, and came towards him a group of deformed blue light creatures and dozens of black market warships. These creatures are stronger than those in the neighboring star domain. Their bodies are almost entirely composed of energy. The blue light at the core is burning like flames, and the roars are shaking the stars. Wanna slap me? Ask my fist first. Haoyu roared angrily, and his hands slammed his mind and exploded. The power of the stars instantly attracted the surrounding stones, turning into a meteor shower and hitting the enemy. Scale of blue light creatures were crushed, and several warships were also blown through, exploding dazzling fire. But the number of enemies is actually too large, and more creatures emerge from the cracks, such as the scattered and the energy cannons of the warplane are constantly slashing, forcing Haoyu to avoid them. Haoyu, don't fight and save your mental power. Sun Xiaowen's voice came from the communication device, bringing a sense of anxiety. It takes time to activate the ultimate weapon, and we must reach the core of the crack. I understand. Haoyu gritted his teeth, concentrated his mind, formed a huge barrier, and forced a wave of energy cannons, then pushed it violently, and the slammed waves to tear a gap between the enemy in front. He quickly turned around and rushed towards the core of the crack. The blue light creatures along the way kept coming and shattered by him one by one. The blue crystal light on the battle suit became more and more powerful, like burning stars. The team was unable to move forward under Haoyu's cover and finally arrived at the core of the crack. The starry sky here is completely covered by blue light, and the crack is like a huge opening mouth. A huge energy vortex formed in the center, emitting destructive waves. Around the whirlpool, the main force of the black market forces was circling. Hundreds of warships formed into a deck of the siege, while Jahan stood on the deck of a giant flag, his hand radiating a blue light that was the same as the crack, and a cold smile on his face. Haoyu, you really dare to come? Jahan's voice spread through the energy waves, surging the starry sky. But this is my main venue, and your ultimate weapons or the fleet are just sacrifices to the door. Sacrifice? I will make you a scumbag today. Haoyu roared, his mind power exploded, and the power of the stars turned into light spears, shooting directly at Jahan's flag. Jahan sneered, and his power rod was swept, and the blue energy formed a spiral, swallowing the light spear. Then he swung his backhand and a powerful wave of energy rushed towards Haoyu, and the starry sky was twisted. Haoyu bit his teeth tightly, and the blue crystal on the battle suit shone brightly, his mind condensed into a giant barrier, barely holding on to this blow, but the entire person was shrunk for hundreds of meters, and he was in pain in the sea of brain. He knew that Jahan's power had become one with the crack, and he could not directly defeat the other party by smuggling his current state. Haoyu, the energy furnace of the ultimate weapon has been activated by 60%, and it will last for another 5 minutes. Sun Xiaowen's voice came from the communication device, carrying a tight flash. I am repairing the final control module, you must hold Jahan. 5 minutes? It's done! Haoyu gasped, wiped off the blood from the corner of his mouth, and a fierce fighting spirit ignited in his eyes. Jahan, come on, let's play a big one. He suddenly closed his eyes, and the scene of the stars and rings appeared in the sea of brains. This time, he no longer simply led to the stones, but completely merged the mind power with the energy of the battle suit. The power inside his body seemed to break through some kind of shackles, turning into a huge star giant, roaring towards Jahan. Every attack of the star beast was filled with destructive power. Lien Jahan's energy spiral was torn apart, and huge cracks were created on the flag deck. It's a bit meaningful. Jahan's eyes flashed with surprise, the power stick shone brightly, and the energy of the crack was fully adjusted by him, turning into an equally huge blue light beast, colliding fiercely with the star beast. The exchange of two forces shocked the starry sky, the surrounding warships and blue light creatures were torn apart by the waves, and Haoyu and Jahan's figures seemed to be hidden in the energy storm. Haoyu, your power of stars is really amazing, but you are ultimately just a mortal. Jahan's voice was ridiculous, and the giant blue light slapped with a claw. The giant star was shattered, Haoyu's entire person was shocked, the traces on the battle suit began to collapse, and blood overflowed from the corners of his mouth. Mortal? I will let you see the stubbornness of mortals today. Haoyu gritted his teeth and stood firmly. The pain in the brain almost made him lose his mind, but he forced himself to use his willpower to gather his mind again. This time, he no longer transformed into a giant beast, but instead focused all his power on his hands and turned into a dazzling beam of light, shooting directly at Jahan. Jahan's expression changed, and his stubborn stick was slapped. The blue shield barely held the light column, but his figure was also shrunk for 10 meters, and a serious look on his face. Good boy, I'm really pushing me. He suddenly inserted his wicket into the flag deck, and the core vortex of the cracks suddenly burst out with an unprecedented energy, as if the entire dimension was roaring. Uncommon blue-light creatures sprinkled out of the vortex, and the number exceeded before, and there were also many large-scale creature leaders, carrying a destructive atmosphere toward the fleet. At the same time, Jahan's body began to merge with the blue light, and his aura burst, like the incarnation of the slit. Haoyu, the weapon activation is completed. At this moment, Sun Xiaowen's voice came from the communication device, carrying a difficult excitement. The energy of the ultimate weapon has been transferred 100% and the control is handed over to you. Now it's up to you. It's finally here. Haoyu's eyes lit up, and he quickly retreated to the core of the galaxy. A complex mind control interface was projected on the console in front of him. The energy boiler emitted strong blue light, which echoed the energy of the crack. He closed his eyes and completely integrated his mental power into his weapon. The brain seemed to be pulled into a sea of stars without any edge, and countless energy was heard from his call. "Jean, the game is over." Haoyu suddenly opened his eyes, pushed with both hands, and finally the energy of the extreme weapon burst out and emitted a dazzling light, like a planet explosion, directly cleaving the core. The blue light creatures and black market warships along the way were instantly vaporized, and Lien Jahan's blue light giant was also torn apart, revealing his shocked expression. "Is this the power of the ultimate weapon?" Jahan roared, trying to adjust the energy of the crack to resist, but the energy of the ultimate weapon exceeded his expectations. The blue shock wave directly swallowed his shield and covered him with his entire personal skull. His body began to disintegrate, and the blue light intertwined with flesh and blood, and aroused a purity. "No! I won't lose. I am the master of the universe." "Master? Go dream." Haoyu bit his teeth and his mental power exploded. Finally, the energy of the extreme weapon was pushed to the extreme limit. The impact wave turned into a sharp blade that penetrated the starry sky, stabbing into the core of the crack. The vortex was torn apart, and countless blue light creatures turned into ashes in the energy wave. Jahan's figure also collapsed in this blow, his power stick broke and turned into fragments to float in the starry sky. "Haoyu, it's successful. The cracking energy is declining." Sun Xiaowen's voice came from the communication device, with a sense of unbelievable joy. It is shown on the light screen that the vortex of the crack core begins to shrink, and the blue light gradually fades, as if it is sealed in the bottom. Haoyu gasped heavily, and the pain in the brain almost made him faint, but as the crack gradually disappeared, he finally smiled. "Jahan. See you again." The energy wave of the ultimate weapon continued for several minutes. When everything calmed down, the starry sky at the core of the crack returned to its tranquility, the blue light completely disappeared, leaving only a piece of silence and silence. The survivors of the team burst into a shocking horror. Haoyu sat next to the console, the blue crystal light on the battle suit was dim, and his body almost lost strength. "Haoyu, you did it." Sun Xiaowen walked to him, her eyes flashed with a tiny light, and her voice was choked. "You destroyed the crack source, sealed the unknown dimensions, and saved the entire human being." "Hey, don't exaggerate me, I don't think so much." Haoyu grinned and wiped off the sweat. "I just want to protect my home and protect you, family." Sun Xiaowen was stunned for a moment, then she showed a warm smile and patted him on the shoulder. "You have done it, Haoyu. You are a real hero." A few days later, a grand ceremony was held in the core of the sky, and all the high-level and warriors in the Alliance gathered together to wish the rift's threat to be finally lifted. Standing on the high platform in the center, Haoyu wore an honorary uniform awarded by the Alliance, and a seal of Star Guardian on his chest, becoming the youngest legendary hero in human history. His mental power reached an unprecedented peak in this battle and was recognized as the strongest mindset in the universe. "Haoyu, let's say a few words." Instructor Rick stood aside and patted his back with a smile. Haoyu snatched his head and was a little unhappy with this kind of scene, but he cleared his throat and picked up the phone. Actually, I have nothing to say. From the minor of Karma 7 to the present, I just want to say, thank you for trusting me. The universe is still big, and there may be new challenges in the future, but I will always guard here in our home. A warm sound broke out from the audience. Sun Xiaowen stood in the crowd, looking at Haoyu's back, her eyes filled with relief. She knew that this young man who had emerged from the mine had grown into the pillar of the future of human beings. After the celebrity, Haoyu and Sun Xiaowen came to the viewing platform of the core of the sky, overlooking the vast starry sky. The stars are shining, as if they are illuminating a new path for them. Sister Xiaowen, what plan do you have next? Haoyu leaned against the column, his temperament relaxed. Sun Xiaowen pushed the lens and smiled and said, although the ultimate weapon has completed its mission, its technology can be applied to more fields, such as star exploration and energy development. I will continue to research to make the future of human beings a better place. What about you? Me? Haoyu turned his head, looking at the starry sky far away, with a flash of light in his eyes. I want to see the edges of the universe, whether there are other cracks, or other unknowns. In short, as long as humans need me, I will be there. Sun Xiaowen clicked the head and said lightly, then let's go together. In the new international era, someone always needs to open the road. Haoyu grinned and stretched out his hand, okay, let's go together. The two of them slapped their hands and laughed under the starry sky. The stars far away are shining, as if they are blessing them. The shadow of the crack has become the past, and Haoyu and Sun Xiaowen's eyes have turned to a broader future. The universe is boundless, and their stories will become the most dazzling legend in human history.